Just as in history, geography also has contingency in its past. And but for a particular episode, we might have a very different underlying geography of New Orleans. I'm standing on the banks of the Pearl River, Hancock County, Mississippi behind me, St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana over here. And this flows out and meets the Mississippi Sound in the Gulf of Mexico about 1 mile in this direction. So starting around 4,500 years ago, the sand that flowed out in the water column here got deposited at the edge of the Gulf Coast and was swept westward by these longshore currents. And so what this created was a barrier island, much like today's Grand Isle, Ship Island, Dauphin Island, these east-west oriented barrier islands of white sand under the subtropical sun. This is 4,500 years ago, and a couple hundred years later, the Mississippi River coming in from the west, heading east, jumps in a new channel and comes eastward and finds this pre-existing barrier island. So two things result out of this. One, the river is blocked from moving northward, and so it continues eastward, and that creates some of the sediment deposition that creates the modern-day New Orleans landscape. The other thing that this barrier island, which geologists call the Pine Island, did was that it prevented the river from spreading sediments to the north and instead left behind a bay of brackish water, a tidal lagoon that we call Lake Pontchartrain. Later on, the Mississippi River deposited its own alluvium, sand, silt, and clay particles on top of the Pearl River sand that created the Pine Island and buried it in place. And to this day, unbeknownst to the roughly 165,000 New Orleanians who live on top of it, there is a underground subterranean relic barrier island that geologists today call the Pine Island Trend. We would have a very different urban geography were it not for this old island. Incredibly, we are in the city of New Orleans right now, the extreme eastern tip of Orleans Parish. St. Tammany Parish is right over there on the other side of the Wrigley's Channel. This is one of the ways to get in and out of Lake Pontchartrain, and thus the presence of this 1835 fort here protecting the Wrigleys, and this is called Fort Pike. Over my left shoulder here, way out in the distance, you'll see some trees on the horizon. What's exceptional about that point out there, it's the only part of the otherwise subterranean Pine Island Trend that actually breaks the surface. So if you go out there, you'll see a really unusual thing for a saline marsh, and that is a sandy surface, and that explains why you have pine and oak trees out there. Now we're in the heart of New Orleans, in the neighborhood of Gentilly, about 30 miles straight west of where we were previously, and we're actually on top of the Pine Island Trend right now. It is below us here, anywhere from a few inches going as far down to 30 feet, where beneath which lies the suballuvial surface. The significance of this spot, this particular spot, is that if you look behind me here, you'll notice that different colored flood wall over there. That is the first of the two breaches on the London Avenue outfall canal, which failed during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Extremely high surge water that made its way into Lake Pontchartrain entered the outfall canal here, put extreme pressure on the insufficiently deep sheet piling, permeated the soils and the sands below of the Pine Island Trend, weakened the flood wall and the levee from below, and it collapsed. So you would have had high velocity salt water flooding this Gentilly neighborhood here, and this explains why this house behind me, you see this foundation, was completely destroyed. Afterwards, as residents were able to come back about a month later to survey their wrecked properties, they were mystified to see these sand dunes here, these piles of sand higher than cars halfway up to a house. What it was those 4,500-year-old subterranean sands deposited by the Pearl River.